Imagine working in a hot factory for almost 14 to 16 hours a day with no breaks, inhaling irritants with no PPE, and enduring abuse from their boss, physical, verbal, and in some cases even sexual. Oh, and don't forget, you're only 8 years old. Well, that's the reality for a lot of sweatshop workers that make clothes for places like H&M, Nike, and Shein. I've done some research into sweatshops and found some credible sources to talk about the effects of the employees of these places and how pressure from the people can help change these practices. It may seem like sometimes you, an individual, can't make much change in the world, especially against big companies, but that's not the case. You can make change and influence change in the world around you. Today we will talk about the conditions of these workers and how past boycotts have been successful. Now we can talk about why this is important. The market data reports from 2024 from Guinness.org show that even now companies are still using sweatshop. The research shows that 85% of sweatshop workers are young women between the ages of 15 to 25 and are forced to work for over 48 hours a week, sometimes up to 14 to 16 hours a day with no breaks. Many of these sweatshop workers also report physical abuse by the people who run these warehouses and are paid very little, often not enough to support themselves. The reason that they're able to do this is because warehousemen will look for young women who are desperate for work and sometimes even look for children who may have families to support at home. The likely reason these practices still exist now is because they make these companies more of a profit than they would if they had legitimate factories and paid their workers fair wages. These industries make about $1.5 trillion a year due to the fact that they do not pay their workers a fair wage and have no interest in maintaining the upkeep and safety of these factories. They're able to do this because of the lax labor laws in other countries and are able to circumvent that by outsourcing their work. A lot of people believe that as an individual they can't do anything to change the practices of big companies, but I can prove otherwise. To help change these issues, I believe the best way to go about it would be to boycott, find out which companies utilize sweatshops and which companies don't, and give business to ethical businesses that pay fair wages and have decent work environments. According to ethicalconsumer.org, there are many different boycotts in history that were successful in bringing about change. In April of 2000, Mitsubishi pulled out of an industrial salt project in Mexico due to the environmental reasons, following boycotts from the public, and that's just one example of many successful boycotts in U.S. history alone. There was also, in May of 2007, boycotts of De Beers, and that caused them to sell their diamond deposit because of protests due to the company pushing the Kalahari Bushmen from their ancestral homeland. And the movement life cycle is first the issue is identified, and then the public is made aware of this, and then they start organizing with clear goals and consensus, clear leadership, increased government attention, and intermittent activity, usually spanning over years. Once this starts, then the boycotts and then the symbols and the icons and all of that go through, and advocates start joining, and well-developed alliances with advocacy groups, government, media, and consumers eventually cause pressure on these companies to change their practices. You may be wondering what it would be like if this were to continue. If companies were allowed to continue utilizing sweatshops, the workers would slowly get worse in health, and soon the companies would go even cheaper, possibly lowering wages even more and allow more abuse to these young people to keep them in line. According to cleanclothes.org, since 2021, 238 workers have already died and over 800 reported injuries, and those numbers are slowly climbing. Now we can talk about where to go to get information and which organizations can help. You can get more information from the Business and Human Rights Resource Center, and overall, buying from local businesses and even buying secondhand from thrift stores. Thank you for taking your time to listen to me, and I hope this information will influence people to research companies and what practices they engage in. I hope that after all this, you are encouraged to boycott these companies and help stop the usage of sweatshops. These sweatshops causes injuries, sickness, and utilize the labor of children for a profit, and history proves that boycotts are successful. Despite many people's belief, you can make a difference in many people's lives. So let's save lives and help stop the usage of sweatshops.